Let's talk about lighting. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about studio lights, budget studio lights. I've seen so many churches recently looking at setting up a studio for their online church space. And if you're going to be doing that, one of the things that you're definitely going to want to consider is lighting. How do you light that studio space? People often ask me, what camera should we buy? We want to improve our video quality, what camera should we buy? And I'll always say to them, before you look at buying a camera, look at your lighting, because you can probably improve what you've got already just by improving your lighting. Lighting makes a huge difference to a camera. A camera works by picking up light that's reflected off people and objects and surfaces and things, and if you haven't got enough light or you haven't got good enough quality light reflecting off those things, your cameras are really not going to do a very good job. So always look at upgrading your lighting, and if you're going to look at upgrading your cameras, look at upgrading your lighting as well, because the two things just go hand in hand if you want to improve your video quality. So over the last 12 months or so, I have been putting studio lighting into this space and working out how I want to light this space. And I've tried out a number of different techniques and a number of different lighting units, lighting fixtures, to try and work out the best way for me to be able to do that in a space like this. And so what I'm going to do is just share with you some of my thoughts, some of the things that I've found, and show you the lights that I've tried and the ways that I've tried to use them. Here today, I'm going to be talking about 3 video lights, and these are just basic video lights that you'll find online. Some of them are not that expensive at all, and it's a really good, cost-effective way of being able to upgrade studio lighting in a studio space for broadcast, for online church, that kind of thing. So to start off with, these are the 3 lights that I've used. I've got the Neewer SL60W, and this might be perhaps the most common, the most popular light that you might find online. You see these all over the place, and to be fair, they're very, very good. The reason you see them is because they're also fairly cheap. They are the cheapest of all the lights that I've tried and all the ones that I've used, and they do a really good job. And for the price, I don't think you can really beat them. They are very, very good, but we'll come more onto that in a minute. I also have the Sokani X60 as well, and this is another very similar light to this one. They're both 60-watt LED lights, but if you look at the sizes of the two, you can see just how much smaller the Sokani is in comparison to the Neewer. Both of them, as I say, 60-watt lights. Both of them do a fairly reasonable job. I've got no problems really in recommending either of these 2 lights. I'll talk more about the specific details between these 2 later on, but both very good, very reasonable lights. And then the 3rd light that I have, I'm actually using right now, it's the one that's lighting me. It's an Amaran light, which is actually manufactured by Aperture. Aperture is a brand that you may have heard of. They're a brand who make very high quality, good quality studio lights, and kind of much more expensive. And I'm not really going to look at those today because they are out of the scope of this. This is about budget lighting today, so we're not going to look at those Aperture lights. They are more expensive, a lot more expensive, but Amaran is like their kind of budget brand, so it's the cheaper end of what they do. Now that Amaran light is the most expensive of these 3 still, and it's also slightly higher powered. That one is 100 watts as opposed to these 2 at 60 watts, so it's a slightly bigger, slightly brighter light, slightly more expensive, but a very high quality light. So let's talk about the detail of these lights then. So first of all, the Neewer. This was the first light that I purchased, and this was the one that I would have been using in some of my early videos. And I like this light. It's a very good light. It produces a very good quality of light. And again, we can talk about light quality in a minute. The other thing that all of these lights have in common is a mount on the front of here called a Bowens mount. And the Bowens mount allows you to attach and detach different fittings on the front of here. So I can put on a diffuser or a softbox or a lantern, but they can change on quite quickly and easily. There's a little lever or a button that you have to push to release, and then it's a small twist and off it comes. Okay, so what is a softbox? A softbox is something like this. This one is collapsed down, but if we take it up, it just pops out. Quite often they will just pop out like this. Sometimes you have to actually assemble them, but this one just collapses And you end up with this big kind of umbrella-y looking thing. And the idea is that the light shines in through the hole in the back. That clips on. This is the Bowens mount and clips onto the front of the light. And through here, we actually have 2 layers of diffusion, and diffusion just helps to soften this light and stop any kind of hard shadows or anything like that on my face or on anything else around me. So it works really nicely in a studio context. It's great to be able to use something like this. And over here right now, I'm using a lantern. If you can see this, this is a big, round, almost balloon-shaped thing. And the idea of that is it just throws light in a much wider circle and actually softens it even more. So I actually get light bouncing off the roof, bouncing off the walls. It kind of really helps to soften the light. And I'll show you a comparison video here between the softbox and the lantern, and you will notice the shadows on my face, and I particularly notice it in the background behind my head on the shelf where I've got some cameras and lenses and things on the shelf, and there's a small shadow on the wall. With the lantern, those shadows are much softer, and with the softbox they're slightly harder, but in both cases they are very soft and very usable, and both types of lighting fixtures work really, really well. The huge advantage of the softbox is it does control that light a bit more and point it more in the direction that you want it. The lantern does just throw it everywhere, so it's lighting up the ceiling, it's lighting up the walls, it's lighting up the floor, it's lighting everything in the room, whereas a softbox does control that and direct it somewhat in the direction that you want it to go in. So it's not necessarily one's better than the other, they're just 2 different ways of diffusing the light, and they're going to work differently in different situations. Okay, so let's talk specifics on these lights. So the Neewer light, as I've said, I think the light quality that comes out of this is very usable. It's very reasonable. There's no major problems with it. It's not the best, but as this is the cheapest light, I think there's no real major complaints there. The things that I found most difficult about this are the size. It is the biggest of the 3 lights. But beyond that was the noise. The fan noise on this I found to be fairly loud. Now that was a problem for me in this room because it's a fairly small room. This room is about 5 meters by 3 meters, and the fan noise in here was noticeable and enough to be distracting in the background of some of my videos, and I did find quite quickly that I couldn't really use this for filming in a small room. Now I still have these lights and I still keep them and I still use them because they work fine in a bigger space, and if I'm filming in a church or if filming in anywhere that's a larger, more open space, the fan noise disappears quite quickly. So if you're in a fairly big room, a big hall, an auditorium, anything like that, the fan noise really won't be an issue for you, and in those situations I've got no problems in using this light. Secondly, the Sokani light. This one was great. The size of this was brilliant. I love how compact this light is. It's so small. It really does fit very well into a small studio space like this. So this space, I use the Sokani quite often in one of the corners of the room and use it to throw light into a certain space. I quite often use it as a fill light to fill in perhaps the side of my face, or as a backlight to backlight me from somewhere, but it's just so small and so compact, it works really well for that. And the grills on here, it's got a really large open grill, top and bottom, and also a nice big heatsink in here. So in terms of cooling, it's a lot more efficient, which means the fan noise is much, much less. This is a very usable fan, no problems at all with this. The downside of this light is I did think the light quality on this was the worst of the 3, and I'll show you that in a minute, but it's nothing major. It's fine. There's no kind of big problems with the light quality, but it is not quite as good as the other 2. And price-wise, well, it sits about in the middle. The Neewer is the cheapest, the Amaran's the most expensive, this was somewhere in the middle of the 2. And overall, I do think it's a very usable light. I don't have any major issues with this. And if you want something that's really quiet, really compact, and does a reasonable job, this is a very good light to look at. And then finally, the Amaran 100x. This has been my main go-to light, and I do really like this light. I think this has been my favorite light, certainly of all these ones to use. That extra bit of power, the 100 watts in that LED, are really helpful, just helps to brighten up a space, really helps to light it very, very effectively. It means that I can use the lantern diffuser and not have to worry about losing so much of that light. As I said, the softbox helps to focus that light in one particular direction, which when I was using the 60 watt lights was very helpful, just to help concentrate that light more into one particular area. With the 100 watt light fixture here, I can use the lantern and lose a bit of that light, throwing it into walls and ceilings and floors and things, and not particularly notice it in terms of the brightness in this space. Fan noise, it's very, very quiet. I don't have any problems at all with the fans on there. And in terms of size, it fits about between these two. It's not quite as small as the Sokani, but it's neither as big as the Neewer either. It's somewhere in the middle. Still a very reasonably compact light and doesn't cause me any issues in this smaller studio space. So the Amaran light is my favourite and I do really like it, but it's also the most expensive, so you might not want to spend that much money on a lighting fixture. So one of the things I've said here is about light quality, and I thought it'd be good just to take a minute to explain what I mean by that. You will find that different lights are more or less able to light up colours in particular and to do a good job of accurately showing what the camera is being pointed at. So in true Gerald Undone style, I made this little video clip here with the three lights side by side, and you can see how the colours change between those three lights. Now here I have a little video clip that I filmed of all three of the different lights. They're all filmed into the same camera. This was my Sony A7 camera. I did record this down in a log profile, and then I did do a basic colour grade, but I applied the same colour grade to all three of these. Now the only other change that I made here was to increase the ISO because of the brightness difference with the 60 watt LEDs compared to the 100 watt LED. With all three of these lights I used the same softbox diffuser, and with all three of these images there was no other lighting on in the room, but there was a bit of daylight coming in through the window. However, it was a cloudy day and that was fairly minimal amount of light that was coming in, so most of the light that you can see here was coming directly off the lighting fixtures. Now you can see in those little clips that the Amaran did come out slightly clearer, the colours are slightly more accurate. You can see there just there's a slight difference in the colours, in the details, in the accuracy of that image. I think the Neewer light has a slight green tinge to it. Certainly it's slightly warmer, slightly greener. And the Sokani is possibly slightly cooler and slightly bluer. They're all supposed to be the same colour temperature, but there is definitely a slight colour shift for the Sokani and the Neewer. And I guess it's also important to point out that the Amaran 100x, the X does indicate that this is a variable light. It can shift colour. We can choose what colour we want that light to be. I have actually set it to the same colour temperature as the others. They're all set to be identical, but as you can see, there are some differences there. Now I think with all of these lights, they're all very usable, and if you put any one of those in isolation, I don't think you would consider it to look bad. And if you're doing filming, any of those slight colour shifts could be fairly easily corrected with a bit of colour grading and a bit of colour correction. So in conclusion then, I do like all three of these lights, and all three of them do have their place and all three of them do have their pros, but they do also have their cons. If you want the cheapest light available, the Neewers are great and they do a really good job. Just watch out for that fan noise. If you want something a little bit quieter, the Sokani is a really good option, and that compact size makes it fit really nicely into almost any studio space. And if you want the most accurate, detailed light with a bit more power to it, and you don't mind paying the extra money, then the Amaran is also a really good option for you. And actually, since purchasing that, they've also now released some smaller 60 watt versions, which are very much compatible with these. I think it's still slightly more expensive, but it's really put them into this particular price point and this particular market with these two lights. So all three of those are really good options to consider if you're looking to light a small studio space. So that's it. Hopefully that has been helpful for you. I will see you in the next video. If you've liked this video, please subscribe. It makes a huge difference to the channel, and also thumbs up is also really helpful too. If you've got any questions, chuck them in the comments below. And I'm going to leave you with those clips of those comparisons and a few different test shots that I made with all these lighting fixtures. Hopefully you'll find that helpful. See you in the next one. Cheers, guys.